Hello, I'm glad you're here. Yes, I'm David Hall, and welcome to the first of what will be many writing workshops, creative writing workshops. And today we're going to do a little bit of poetry. What I need you to do before we start is, first of all, make sure that you are all muted. There will be time we're going to look at a poem. There'll be time that I'll have you ask questions or answer questions about it. Make comments, and just throw up the raise hand or thumbs up emoji and I'll click on you. And I do apologize right now. I am from West Virginia, small town. I moved here a few years ago, and I'm not familiar with all the pronunciations of such beautiful names. And so if I mispronounce your name and trying to draw you into a conversation, please forgive me. So there's that. And also, this is active and not just passive. So when we do some writing, we will write. And so there will be stretches of time when there's nothing going on, but from me. But you'll be expected to write. So you can open a tab now, or if you have a notebook beside you, just be prepared to do that. So let me go ahead and get started. Share the screen. I'm letting other people kind of run the chat. So if there's something that's going on, like, slow down or something like that, maybe they can, oh, that's the end. Sorry. Let me do this the hard way.
We've got your back, David. We'll help you out.
I'm sorry?
I said, we've got your back. We'll help you out.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. All right, so this, again, is our first BreakBread poetry workshop. I'm going to set some things up before we get started. I've gotten all the technical stuff out of the way, but now we get into the writing soul of it. But first, keep in mind that this is a three-part process. Three-part process. Today, we're generating material. Now, this is going to be very important. You're generating. We're going to set it up. We're going to work on poetry and that sort of thing. But it's not just you sit and listen. You are writing. You're going to generate something. You're going to revise it or work on it, and then send it to help@breakbread.org by Friday the 2nd. That's next Friday. And then we're going to get all back together. And the talented Jennifer Espinoza is going to work with you on a peer workshop on Tuesday the 6th. And so this is not just a one and done. This is, we're building this tight community, working on these pieces together. And it's going to be cool. It's going to be great, but you got to be all in. So just so you know, this is the whole journey for the piece that you're writing today. Some other rules for the road before we go take our journey here. First and foremost, I'm a huge Jack Kerouac on the road beat poet fan. And one of his notes of the spontaneous, I forget that, I should make the note. But anyway, he gave us a list of writing rules and regulations. And somewhere on the list it says, you're a genius all the time. And I say that quickly just to say that we cannot afford in the next 40 minutes for that little editor that sits on whatever shoulder it sits on, or ghosts you in the background, who continues to say, that's not good, don't write that down, what are other people going to think? None of that. Everything that you come up with, you put on paper, it's perfect, it's gold, it's exactly what you want to say in the moment. We'll change it if we need to, but don't hesitate, just write it down. That leads me into number 2, which is poetry is poetry is poetry is, and so on and so on. We're going to work with one form today, just to give us sort of a structure to start a piece. But it's not like, oh, I'm not a poet. I've struggled with that label for a long time myself. Or I am a poet and I know, but it doesn't matter. The language that goes down will be poetry. It may look different than what we start out. It might look like a nonfiction piece. It might look like dialogue in a short story, but we're going to say that it's poetry is poetry is poetry because that's where we are. Third, almost done. Third, there is no blueprint for any of this. I'm going to talk about a form, but if what you create goes sideways from that form, that's where you are in the moment. So there's not a failure. Oh, I didn't write this the way it's supposed to be, the way you told me to, the structure you gave us, David, so I must have done it wrong. Then the way you can do it wrong is to not do it, because you're creating something that hasn't been created before. There's no blueprint. You might start with one, but you're going to change it and make it your own and make it something that will matter to people, because number 4, your voice does matter. For the next 45 minutes or so, you must surrender yourself to this universal truth. Your voice matters. That goes back to number 1, that goes back to number 3. Anything that goes down, you can't say it doesn't sound good enough or it's not important. I get that a lot. Oh, I haven't had a lot of struggle. I haven't had a lot of this. I haven't had a lot of that. That's not what we're here for. We're here for what's going on in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, goes on paper, and you're crafting it into something larger for the world. And when you take yourself seriously, then the rest of the world will. When you say to the universe, my voice matters, the universe will listen. So there you go. We good so far? I'm going to take that silence as a yes. We are good so far, and we're moving. When I came up with this, when I decided to do poetry for this workshop, I am primarily a fiction writer. And just recently, maybe the past 2 years, maybe a little more, I have gone into poetry. I am by no means a poet per se, but I'm getting there. And one of the things I thought would be important is that if we looked at a form, one of the coolest forms, probably one of the more challenging forms to write. But I thought if we looked at a form, forms give us a path. Forms give us a structure on which we can start hanging things. Now, it doesn't mean that what we end up with will be exactly that form. We're allowed to change and manipulate, but it gives us some place to start. Oftentimes I'm working with students and they'll say, I have no idea what, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to put down. And I find that forms allow you that, oh, that's a structure. I'm going to start hanging things in that structure. Again, it'll change and that's fine, but you have to have some place to go. And just recently, I've discovered this, well, not recently, past handful of years, I've discovered, I think it's pronounced guzzle. That's what I'm going to say. That's what the poets.org says. If the Academy tells you to pronounce it some way, then that's how you pronounce it. I personally like gazelle because I like the accenty sound, but I could be wrong. But anyway, G-H-A-Z-A-L is our form today. Handful of things you should know about it. One, it's an Arabic form. It's centuries old. At its core, it deals with loss in romantic love, and you can like expound and expand on that idea throughout. And when you do research and you look at other ghazals, then you'll find out like, oh, okay, they talked about this, they talked about that, and all that sort of thing. There are other details in it, and as we're going to look at one and talk about it, you're going to see some other details in it, but primarily that's the basis of it. The structure is couplets, 5 to like 15, somewhere between 5 and 15 couplets. Each couplet ending in the same word. Now, not every line ends in the same word, but every couplet. These two, here's a word, these two, here's a word, these two, here's a word, and so on. The cool thing about that is you start to figure out, you start to look at, you start to understand how particular words work in different ways, not just the different meanings of the words, but how if this word comes at the end of a sentence, what that says to how that informs my reading of that sentence. and things like that. It's fascinating. So we're going to look at that. And I'm also a language person first and foremost, and I thought that this form also spoke to that idea of just playing with language. The other thing is each couplet is autonomous, which is an AP word for it stands alone. There is your challenge. So you have these couplets that as a whole piece tell a story or give an experience or whatever of this poem's supposed to do. But then if I break it down, look at these two lines, this couplet, they also say something. I could pull that out, pop it in and say, here's a cup, pop it into a different document and say, here's a couplet, and that couplet would stand on its own. There would be meaning there. And that's fascinating. It's really cool. And the lines should be of particular, they should be about the same length. Now, as we're going to look at one, understand, again, there are other nuances to it. My approach to poetry form is here's the shell, here's the skeleton of it. And then as we work on it, we're going to start hanging pieces on it. And then we come up with what we have. So there's that. So we can continue. So we can continue into our study of the ghazal. I bring one to you. It's called Vindication by Claudia Castro Luna. And she just looks like poetry is the best thing ever. She just like radiates this idea of poetry. I am poetry, poetry and everything. That's the best picture of a poet ever. The background, normally I don't do this, but I find this background interesting. First of all, she was born in El Salvador, which is cool. She has a degree in anthropology and a master's degree in urban planning and an MFA from Mills College. I bring this to you to tell you if you're pursuing, first of all, writers are writers. There you go. As an aside, writers are writers. But if you're pursuing other ways of living your life, anthropology, urban planning, what have you, law school, what have you, the poet's soul still lives there. And I think that that's very cool. Think about how the poetry works in, say, a meeting that she would be having in the urban planning. That's just fascinating. That's just really cool. And she's also poet laureate, as of last year, the poet laureate of Washington State. If you're not familiar with that concept, every state has like the poet they go to and say, hey, poet, tell us about whatever's going on. And that poet does that. And I think that's very cool. So anyway, here she is. And here is Vindication. There it is. So I'm going to read it. And then I'm going to open the floor for some discussion. As we're reading it, I want you to feel it. I want you to feel what it's saying to you. We'll talk about the feeling, what you're getting from it. We'll also talk some technical things like how she's using that word at the end of the couplets, how a couple of couplets work together, work individually, because remember our couplets have to stand by themselves, and a few other things she does that are in the ghazal that are supposed to, that I didn't mention, but that she does. All right, so Vindication. They signed the Declaration of Sentiments with nib of rib, the right to suffrage their daring. Called ugly then witch, pretty then weak, to be once woman and voter, their daring. Hunger, headaches, heartaches, hatred, death, all this and more it cost them, their daring. As men are born with God's grace, so are women, they urged and argued with brains and daring. With firm convictions and hopes of fallen yokes, steadfast they marched, nursing dreams of future, daring. Sojourner, Dolores, their daughters left behind, now work against voter suppression with daring. There is more work on the horizon, more yeast to knead in the bread of their daring. Persist, Claudia, in mind and body, be not ugly, not pretty, but ablaze with daring. First of all, what we do in my class is we snap it up. So I think there's a snap emoji or a clap emoji. Like that's how you do that. That is like, wow. All right, my first question to you is, what do you notice? What do you notice about it?
She uses the word daring at the end of every line.
Now, is that Chica?
Yes, it is.
Hello, Chica.
Hello.
Now, think of the word daring and using it at the end, that's her word. Remember, every couplet ends with the same word. Her word is choosing daring. What do you, the way she's using it, what does daring mean? The way she's using it, what do you think daring means?
Like fearless, bold.
Yes.
Like they dare to fight for their rights and they dare to go against, you know,
Yes.
the social
Yes.
norms.
Yes.
Right. I would say audacity as well in this sense. Like, to me, that's what I'm hearing when I see it.
I also like how she uses many like female things, like the nib of the rib. It reminds me of like Adam and Eve and how she has the rib, and then also like the yeast to knead into the bread. Like that's such a female role in the house, is cooking and things like that.
Yes. Hang on, before I want to comment on these things. Absolutely. And I'm glad that someone pointed out, technically, there's supposed to be in my research, there's supposed to be a slight rhyme somewhere up front, and that's what nib of rib, that's a technical thing, nib of rib. But yes, I'm so glad someone pointed out that it's a biblical reference, Adam and Eve, and the importance is, the cool thing here is, it's not just, oh, from the rib of Adam, but that man, according to the story, man was created first, and then woman came. And this is about, oh, men, you have your thing. Part of what she's talking about, men, is you have your thing. Now, these are women who are standing up for what is theirs. And it's a writing thing, because the thousands of centuries ago, before we had like computer things, you would dip some hard thing into like an inkwell or blood or something as you wrote. And so the nib is like the little end of it's like the little end, like that's the nib. And then like it's like the little edge of the rib, and it's like writing from his rib. It's just brilliant. And it's 3 words. All right. What else do you see? What else do you notice?
She just used her name in the second last line. Persist Claudia in mind and body be.
Okay, tell me more about that. Why do you think she does that?
I just have read already a couple of ghazals in Urdu, so I already know that it is a specific form of a ghazal in which in the last few lines they just use their names. The poet just uses their name.
Before I let you go, let me ask you one more question. First of all, thank you. See, this is why I do this. I learn as much from you as you learn from me. You probably, sadly, you might learn, I probably learn more from you. But anyway, now, yes, technically in the last line, the last couplet, there is the author's name drops in there. Now it says, she says, persist Claudia in mind and body, be ugly, not pretty, but ablaze with daring. So my question is, it's not just her name. What is she saying in that last couplet to herself? What is she saying to herself?
Just go on and keep on daring with the stuff, but just keep this in your mind that you are not ugly, you are not pretty. Just don't think about the facts, but you just have to perceive one thing into yourself that is daring with the stuff, and you just have to make the thing correct.
Yes. Yes. Yes, that's it. Thank you. That's exactly it. Again, the technical is the last couplet has your name, the name of the author, and it's not just thrown in there. And it is about people who stood up. We're going to talk about some couplets in a second, but people who stood up against the not just voter suppression, but oppression of who they are to begin with. It's weaved throughout. And then at the end, it's just like, you know, you do not exist on your own. Be daring, because think about what's come before you and forget what you might think, forget what other people might think about, you know, and mind and body be not ugly, not pretty, but ablaze with daring. Don't worry about all that other stuff. You come from people, from women who have dared, and this is what you must do, and it's a beautiful thing. Let's talk quickly. Let's talk quickly about a couple of the couplets. Okay. Hunger, headaches, heartaches, hatred, death, all this and more, it cost them their daring. Now, by itself, this is a very fundamental question. By itself, what did, in being daring, what did they encounter? Just that couplet.
In many parts of the world, when you are daring to do something, it just costs a lot. And when it costs a lot, you have to suffer a lot for different things. And when you are actually, you just have a point to go on, you don't think about that what's happening with you, but you have to face a lot. Still, there are different facts in the human body that require a lot. Your body requires much. You actually have to suffer a lot. You have to go on with different things, your relationships, your family, and all the other people who are connected with you, they're also getting affected. So hunger, headache, hatred, that this is all what you perceive when you are daring to do something which is not correct in the sight of the world, or it might be correct, but you are the one who is pointing out the correct thing. So you are the one who, and especially if you're a woman, in many parts of the world, still the women are very like they are uneducated and they don't know how to stand for themselves. So if one among them to stand up there, she have to just do up with a lot of different things in order to get success.
Yes. That's yes. And thank you for that, the shout out to the international, like in many parts of the world, because I think that's key to this understanding as well. So in the daring, it's one thing to say, you know, they dared to fight back against, you know, the oppression of the men. We'll get into some of that in a second. But what does it cost? It is, you go hungry, you'll have headaches, you have heartaches. People will not like you. I mean, that's what this is about. In death, there are some people who don't survive the other side of the daring. We say stand up for your rights and march and all that kind of stuff. And historically speaking, some people don't survive it. And you have to be, and she is making you aware that in doing this, I mean, look at what this cost these women. Just as to be daring enough to say, I'm going to vote. It is fascinating. And there was another, oh yes, and then there was more work on the horizon, this couplet. There's more work on the horizon, more yeast to knead into the bread of their daring. The metaphor. Somebody talk to me about the metaphor of the yeast in the bread. Talk to me about the metaphor there.
Well, yeast is the activator in bread, which creates action, and just as she says, there's more work to be done, and that's that work, that action.
Yes. Somebody also pointed out, this is beautiful. Somebody also pointed out that the femaleness of some of the references, that's a really bad way to say that. I apologize. That some of the things that we consider, we connect to women's work, and how she's using that also to empower, and the idea of the bread, kneading the bread. Yes, the yeast is the activator. Yeast makes it all work. You need to put that into the bread. Bread also feeds us. And bread is what these women, the metaphor for what these women do to feed their societies. Regardless of what men have done, regardless of what the law might say, women are feeding these societies. And they push back, and they're still we're not, and they're not done. We're not done. You must continue to do this. I also like it because it's a very small but big action. What I mean by that is, in a moment or 5 minutes, or whenever we start, we're going to start doing some writing. And one of the first things you're going to think is, some of you are going to think is, I don't have anything huge to write about. I'm not, I don't dig all this big, heavy stuff. I haven't had, all these, I haven't had this voter suppression thing to reflect on. But it's the small things that matter too. Poetry can be about the very simple, small things. And I think just the idea of her kneading this bread, that's a very, very small action. But then she blows it up to something that's more, that becomes weighted and heavy and important. So also consider that too, that it's not just all these large things, but the very, very simple actions can be honored through poetry. Let me see, I think that was it. And okay, then the last one. This line, I'll throw it out to get the response, then I want to talk about what I think it's doing for me. It's good, we're good for time. As men are born with God's grace, so are women. They urged and argued with brains and daring. So, what do you think about that? What's going on there?
I want to say it refers to the equalness of how men and women are both created like from the same place, and how she is expressing the fact that both have urged and argued with brains and daring, but with women it has been more of a struggle to be heard and listened to, even though our actions and our words have always been there.
Nicely done. Nicely done. Notice we had the rib earlier, and someone shouted out the Adam's rib, and that's an echo. I use the word echo when I start finding like, oh, they mentioned it here, and they mentioned it's here, and that sort of thing. When I see through story, I think it's what's called in fiction, when you kind of see like, oh, this is going this way across, regardless of whatever else is going on. You can see like this is traveling through the story. I see this idea, the idea of Adam and Eve and some of the religious stuff traveling through to where it says God's grace. So yeah, men and women are both born with God's grace. Like, we are equal. In God's eyes, we are equal. And we had to get you to see that. We have argued and we're urging you to understand with brains, which I love that, and daring. Intellectually, we are equal. And I took a chance to explain that to you. It is daring for me to stand up and say, and use my language to get you to understand what you're doing is oppressing me, and I won't take it anymore. And again, each of these little couplets are separate poems on and of themselves. She's looping them together, and then we get the story. We get the story of the women sitting down, writing down, they're signing this declaration so they can vote, and what it took to get to that point. And then at the end, we're left with, and you're not done. Claudia, you must keep the fight going. We get roped into that as well. We are also Claudia. Persist, and then fill in your name. You must continue this fight. So it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Anything else before we wrap this part up and we start with our writing? Anything else about this piece? Anything like, hey, what about this? No?
I was just wondering who Sojourner Dolores is.
So I was afraid someone would ask that. because I forgot to do the research. Sojourner Truth is one of the, oh Lord, abolitionists who, yes, she was an abolitionist who fought and used language to get equality. Dolores, I wish I had a better answer for. And if anybody out there knows, please. Somebody knows?
David, she with the UFW, with the United Farmers, Dolores Huerta. She's amazing. Like, she's, I think she's just turned like 90 this year, and has been integral in the UFW movement in the United States and organizing farm workers. So she, I believe that's what it refers to. I mean, I could be wrong, but also integral in like voting rights for the kind of Mexican American people. So that's what I thought. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. It is. No, I wish. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for thank you for the insight and the information about that. Yeah, we'll do this quickly. About things like that. My first question, my response to your question should have been, what do you think? And I say that because there's a context here. Whether we know exactly who the people are, and we're finding out more, but whether we know exactly who the people are, they don't, knowing that 100% doesn't necessarily mean that we won't understand that their place in these couplets. Sojourner, Dolores, their daughters left behind, now work against voter suppression with daring. Daughters left behind, their daughters left behind, says to me that something has happened to them, possibly death, possibly imprisonment. Somehow they have been taken off the board, and their daughters, literally their daughters, metaphorically, their daughters, all of us are left behind to carry on the mission. We bring them back in, Sojourner, Dolores, and we understand these are women who are named. First of all, the naming is important. So they are actually named, and we understand that they are important to the cause. Now, we have much more information. Thank you for that information, but, and understand. It's like Declaration of Sentiments. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful phrase. And if you Google and you find out more, you talk to people, you find out more, that's great. But you don't necessarily need to know exactly what that is in order to get the rest of the piece. So it works like that. Oh, and one other thing before you start writing about things like that, when you do historical references, don't worry. Remember, you're a genius all the time. Don't worry that people aren't going to understand it. If you, for those wonderful brains amongst us who are multilingual, you want to shift languages, you want to put in different phrasings for things, please do. Don't worry about your audience not understanding, or you have to explain it or anything. That's for school. You're an artist in this realm, and so whatever comes out, you put down. And then as you're revising, you're like, oh, well, I have to make sure that it's earned its place there. I'm not just putting it in and putting it in, but it's earned its place. That's a different story. When I say earned its place, when you look at Sojourner, you look at Dolores, those names have earned their place. These just aren't just names. We're understanding that, oh, they're named there for a reason. These must be important women. And if I want to take the time and look those things up, look them up, I can. Otherwise, I understand that they are honored in a particular way for what they have done to for the whole cause. So there. All right. I've done a lot of talking. You've done a lot of sitting and watching. So why don't we do some writing? Click on the right, yes. And that's still the best picture of a poet ever. All right, so now it's time to generate. It says 2 minutes. We can do at least a minute or so. We're gonna do 2 lists. The first list is just a list of words. Remember, the couplets end in the same word. So I want you to grab a sheet of paper, your screen or whatever, and for about a minute, maybe 2, just list the words. Words you love, words you hate, words you don't understand, words you know by heart, words that remind you of whatever. Again, there's no wrong way to do this. We're not looking for like the heaviest word or the word with the most meaning. You know, if dog is one of your words because you're in love with your dog, then put that on the list. And it says 2 minutes. I don't know if I'm going to allow that much time. We'll do at least a minute. So I'm going to start the timer, and I'm working with you on this. Let me grab my notebook. All right, so let me do this. All right, are we ready? Here we go. Generate a list of words now. All right. Pause where you are. Okay, shake it off, shake it out, shake your head a little bit. That's right. So I want you to consider your list. I want you to grab one word. Doesn't have to be the first word or the most meaningful right now, but just grab a word, and we are going to da 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 da. That's the official music. Da 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 da. We're going to free write. When I say free write, it's exactly what it says. You write whatever comes up around that word. Do not stop. Let's say maybe we'll do another, let's say 2 minutes. That's a lot of time to write. If you get stuck, say, you can write down, I'm stuck. I don't know what to write next. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done, but you know what? I'm going to do it because I'm just going to do it, and we'll see what happens. And some cool stuff is going to happen. Then don't edit. Remember, you're a genius all the time. This is one of those times. So here we go. Pick a word. Everybody's got a word. Okay, and start writing till I tell you to stop. Okay, and stop. Shake it out. I should have warned you that oftentimes when I write, my favorite music to listen to is Gregorian chants. I know it's kind of strange, but it's really cool. So I played it. I might play it again, just to kind of get us into the whole spiritualness of it all. All right, so there you go. Next up, we need an event. Well, when I say need, you don't need one for the guzzle to work. But if you notice, she talked about, Claudia talked about the journey of women and the right to vote. And so oftentimes it's, again, if you're stuck, oftentimes it's a good idea to kind of hang your poetic ideas onto an event. Now, when I say an event, it can be historically huge. If you want to talk about something that, that's on the scale of, international war, you may. Also can be what I call whisper small. For some people, getting out of bed is a huge thing. And I kid you not. Some days it's just like me getting my feet on the floor and going down and meeting the day is a huge thing. And if you write your guzzle about that, that's absolutely fine. But that's also an event. Something that makes headlines, headline making or heartbreaking, something that hasn't happened yet, past, present, or something that hasn't happened yet, can be an event that you write about. So this will be about 2 minutes too, the same sort of thing, just generate the list. Again, if it ends up not working for you, that's fine, but it's always better to have more than it is to not have enough. That's true for just about everything, except illness. You don't want more illness. But anyway, here we go. 2 minutes, generate a list and go. All right, pause, stop. All right, so like we did with the list of the words, I want you to pick one of those events, and we'll take a couple minutes just to free write about that as well. One more time, before you start, genius rests up here. You don't have to know that many details about the event, by the way. You can just start writing. So go right ahead. Let me set this timer and go. 2 minutes, free write it. Dismiss. All right. All right, all right. Now, we have a list of words. We may end up using one of those words at the end of our couplets, as we've seen. We might choose a different word, but we have our list of words, then we have our list of events, so we have something to write about. Again, if we want to write about something completely different or morph into something else, that's fine. So we're going to kind of put these ideas together for our own ghazal. And it says 10 minutes. I don't know that we'll do that long, maybe at least 5 or 6. Forgive the timer. It's Pac-Man. It's funny. All right, so look at your free writes. Take a minute, shake it out, look over your free writes. Let your free writes tell you where this is going to go. This is the easiest and the best way to do this. Don't go in saying it has to be X, Y, and Z. I must write about the heavy. I must write the. No, look at your free writes. Start trying to figure out what story, what ideas, what's coming out of the soul of your free write. And then we're going to start the ghazal. So remember, it's 5 to 15 couplets. If you get 1 couplet down or 2, that's fine. If you don't get any, we'll talk about that in a second. If you don't get any, that's fine too. And remember, each couplet resides by itself. It's autonomous, but then you put them together and it makes like a whole big poem thing. Remember, as you're writing, that this is a guide. So if you're like, I'm really not feeling this ghazal right now, but I'm starting to see this in it, or this story about my friend, blah, blah, blah. This is starting to come to light and I want to make a poem based on this. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. You're not doing it wrong if it's not a ghazal. It is what it is because the language gets there. All right. Because the language is bringing you there. That's it. So let's do 5 minutes. We'll write maybe 5 or 6. Time permitting, maybe at the end, if someone wants to share maybe 1 line, not the whole thing, but like one collection of words, 5 or 6 words that they came up with a phrase that you're just like, I want to offer this to the world. Again, doesn't have to be huge. You don't want to, you don't have to, that's fine, but we'll think about that. All right, so here's our 10-minute timer, about halfway through. We're working on a guzzle. And so here we go. Oh, no, 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 cancel. All right, and stop. Okay. Yeah, I feel energized. I feel, it's wrong to say. I feel energized. What I have, what you have, is language to work with. That's what the whole idea of today was, to generate. And then we'll talk about what to do with it next. Does anybody have, just briefly, just a hand, not the whole thing, please, we don't have time. I'm sure it's wonderful. I'm sure it's beautiful. It's raw. That's cool. But does anybody have like a handful of words, 6, 7, 10 words that just go together that you want to like offer to the group? You don't have to. No one is forcing you to. But would anybody like to share just a handful of words, just a little bit? You don't have to set it up either. Just like, this is a line I wrote down, and then mute yourself.
I thought I'd share one of the couplets I wrote. It says,
Okay.
"The fan is off, dust collects at the top, no longer does it creak, no, it sits mocking me with its silence."
Oh. Mocking me with its silence. Nice. Try to keep that line. It may change other things, but try to keep that line. I like that. And the fan. See, the little things. The little things. It's a fan. But it's mocking me. It's silence. That's beautiful. All right. Anybody else have one? Andre, is that a hand raise or is that a clap?
I have
Thank you.
one.
Okay.
As we wait for the wars of tomorrow, we make a toast to sweet youth and drink the wine of violence.
Wow. Wow. The Wars of Tomorrow. That's your title, by the way. The Wars of Tomorrow.
Okay.
That's hot. That's fire, as they say. Yes, the Wars of Tomorrow. Yes. Wow. Beautiful. Anybody else? Again, just handful of words.
I wrote arbitrary shame and a stain. God forbid it remain. That's not my full couplet, but that's just a piece of like
Oh,
what I had.
that's the rhythm of that. I like that a lot. See, this is what I told you guys. See, sorry, not guys. That's what I told you at the beginning. All of you at the beginning. You're a genius all the time. This is gold. Again, you mess with it, you mold it to something else, that's fine. That's absolutely good. But in the moment, this is brilliant. This is what creation is. This is what being creative is. Anybody else? Because we're about ready for the wrap up. As much as I'm enjoying myself, we can't live here. We'll have to be done shortly. So, anybody else? No? All right. That's fine. Thank you for today. Our wrap up is as follows. So, you now have a draft. Congratulations. You have a draft of something. Is it going to be a traditional standard guzzle? Maybe. Is it going to be something completely unique and different? Yes, absolutely, because you wrote it. So mess with this, work with it, take it seriously as a piece of art. And by next Friday, the 2nd of October, send it to help@breakbread.org. I think I'll turn it over to my other announcer in a second, but I think we'll want it as docx, maybe a PDF, they can tell you. I meant to clear this earlier. Whatever is easiest for us to get a hold of and for you to send. And then that leads us to our peer workshop on Thursday, October 6th. The time, we'll talk about the time in a second because I forget exactly. It's 7 to 8 on Eastern, so you can do the math to figure it out wherever else you are. And you'll get together and you'll talk about these pieces. And again, if they end up being exactly like the guzzle structure, that's fine. If they end up being something different, that's fine. It is writing, it is poetry. You have written poems today.